Hello everyone. If you are on the brink of divorce, if you are at the point of separation, if your relationship is failing and needs fixing, then this video is for you. In it, you will be getting practical guidelines on what you can do, how you can go about doing it. And you need to watch this video straight through to the end, and perhaps watch it several times in order for the ideas, the concepts, the principles, and the framework to sink deeply in your consciousness that would cause a shift in the current state of affairs in your relationship. You might be thinking that you have tried everything. You might even think that nothing would work because you have done all the things. You have spoken till your mouth is dry. You have gone quiet. You have probably even tried couples counseling and nothing seemed to work. So now you're feeling that you're hopeless and helpless. Now, I would like to tell you something about hopelessness and helplessness. The reason why many people get into that place where they feel helpless and hopeless is simply because they don't know what else to do. They don't have the strategies and the skills that would help them navigate the relationship or the conflict, the trouble, the trials, the tribulation that they're in. But hopefully, we're going to give you some practical guidelines as to where and how to start to move the needle, to reverse the deterioration and the disintegration of your relationship and marriage. But before I go, I need to tell you upfront that I do have something for you. You can download a cheat sheet, a guide in the description. You can pause the video right now and go directly there. Tell me where to send it and I'll send it to you for free. And if you actually need help and support to navigate these sensitive, tricky areas and position that you're in. Maybe you're not speaking. Maybe your spouse has already moved out. Maybe the divorce papers are being drawn up. Please let me know where to send this guide and I'll be delighted to send it to you. And if you need support, please feel free to contact me. So let's dig into this video. It's from Paul Jenkins. I like his video. I like the things that he's saying. I'll put in the description the link to his video, but I would also give you some additional bits of information that would help you along the way. Let's dig in.
Okay, time to get to work today. What I am going to share with you is not easy. The principles are simple. Simple and easy aren't the same thing. If you want an easy solution, you're going to have to go find another channel. If you want one that works, stick around because I'm going to share with you some things that you can do starting right now today that can save a marriage that's on the brink of divorce, but it's not going to be easy. You need to be
Okay, beautiful. I like the introduction. Off the bat, you are being prepared that things that he's going to share with you, they are practical, they're going to work, but they are not necessarily easy. I like the way Paul starts. He literally gives you a framework so that you don't necessarily freak out when he gives you the ideas that you may think, oh my God, this is so hard. Listen, I like how Paul starts. He prepares you and explains to you that, look, this is not going to be an easy thing to do. In fact, you already know it. It's a difficult situation that you're in. But the principles, the ideas, the strategies, the techniques that he's going to share, they are rather simple, but they're going to be difficult to implement. It's almost like losing weight. Much of the things that people have to do, like exercise, maybe swimming, running, walking, they are fairly straightforward things to do. However, they are not easy because you haven't been accustomed to doing these things.
Disclaimer, let me review for you some research that illuminated what direction we need to go. Dr. John Gottman, one of the nation's leading researchers in marriage and couple relationships, found a study that he pulled off over 20 years ago that roughly 70% of all of the problems in a relationship are unresolvable. unresolvables that we face are because of differences. Differences create conflicts, but differences also give us a purpose for that relationship in the first place. It's the differences that make us meaningful and relevant and interesting to each other. And even at the level of gender, this is true in a marriage. Differences are essential to a relationship, but they also create conflict. Now, here's what Gottman found as well. That 70% number is true for miserable, highly conflicted, headed for divorce couples. Not too surprising. That number is also true for happy, well-adjusted, stable, satisfied couples. There was no difference between these two groups in the number of unresolvable problems that they had, or the nature or magnitude of those problems. That's not what distinguished these two groups.
Now, let me just weigh in here. And I think that this is a very vital piece of information that he's sharing. That a lot of people think that the problems that they have are the reasons why they're getting divorced. But the real point that he's making here is that problems, everybody has problems. The happy couples who succeed at relationships and marriage have the same types of problems and the same level of problems that dissatisfied, conflicted, headed for divorce couples have. It's not the problems. And that is important because most people are weighed down and are mired in the issue that these problems are so hard. Marriage is so hard. Marriage is so difficult. And if it wasn't for the difficulty, then, oh my days, we would be at a better place, in a better position. No, everybody has problems. It's not the problems. He's normalizing the fact that all couples, relationships, and marriages have problems, and even the same type of problems and at the same level. So what's the difference? It is actually the way you handle the problems, the way you solve the problems, the way you react and respond to the problems. That makes the major difference. So recognize that, yes, you have problems. Yes, the problems are challenging and difficult. They make your head spin. They give you a headache. They distress you. They cause you all manner of stress in your life. You're not functioning at your optimum. Yes, that is true. However, problems are not insurmountable. In fact, I dare say, and I wanted to make a note on this, is that I heard something that was quite interesting to me. I was at a webinar or someplace and somebody made the comment that people who commit suicide don't want to end their lives. They want to end the pain in their lives. And that got me thinking. And I say that people who are divorcing don't want to end their marriages. They actually want to end the pain, the suffering that they're experiencing in the marriage. Hence, this is really very crucial. If the pain, the suffering could be solved, if the pain, the suffering could be healed, if the pain and suffering could be banished or gotten away or dispelled, if there is healing, if there is restoration, if there is regeneration of the love that you have, then you don't necessarily have to divorce. And here is one of my mantras, that there are actually no bad relationship. Although you may think you're in this situation and you think your relationship is the worst, there are no bad relationships. There are no bad marriages. There are only marriages and relationships where people treat each other badly. And if you just think of that, if you think about the treatment, then maybe there is hope. So if you thought there wasn't any hope for your marriage, think again. Let's continue.
Put on a little light bulb in my head to realize, you know what? It's not about the problems. Because back in shrink school, they taught us bring a couple in, sit them on your couch. Yes, I have a couch right over there. And talk to them for an hour or more about their problems. And people would leave here feeling worse than they did when they came in, or like they're being beat up, or there's no hope. Doesn't work. What we need to do is figure out what's the difference between these miserable, highly conflicted, headed for divorce couples and the ones that are stable and satisfied and just feeling good about their marriage. They've all got problems. So that's not it. Here's the difference. How do they handle those problems? So really quickly, a recap of what Dr. Gottman found on this side. On the miserable side, he called it the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. It's a 4-part process that led people to handling their problems in a way that put them on the miserable side of the board. So here's what he identified. Number 1, criticism. Number 2, defensiveness. Number 3, contempt. And number 4, stonewalling, which is kind of like turning away from each other instead of turning toward each other. Without getting into all of the details about what those 4 horsemen are all about, notice that you do this in your relationship. Yeah, and I don't share this with you to alarm you. I just want you to be aware of what's not working. Because if we persist in doing what's not working, what kind of results do you think we're going to get?
Now, I want to weigh in here that I quite agree and support what he's saying. And I think all of those signs, all of those actions, all of those experiences that people have are very important and significant. And it's a pity that he doesn't have the time to really delve into each of those. But there was a guy called Jeffrey Sataiwan. I'm not too sure. Actually speaks and gives a more comprehensive explanation of why people want to separate. And he calls it that all of us need emotional safety. And because we're not emotionally safe, because we are emotionally triggered, because we're emotionally hurt, because we're emotionally dissatisfied, because we're emotionally starved, our emotional needs are starved, that is why many of these other symptoms we criticize, because hurt people. So when we are hurting, when we are starving, when we are not getting our needs met, our emotional needs met, when we don't feel safe, when we try to say something and we get shut down, we get insulted, we get rejected, we get invalidated, all of these tend to make the relationship unsafe for us because we are hurting. Maybe not physically, and sometimes even physically it boils over into physical abuse, but emotionally we are being abused, and we abuse each other to the point where we bleed our hearts. In fact, they've shown that when you have a heartbreak, when you hurt emotionally, the same part of your brain that responds when you get a physical blow, a physical wound, a physical injury, that part of the brain is activated when you're emotionally hurt. So there are many people, and I dare say you and your spouse, who have been hurt, who have been pounded, who have been shot with bullets, words, that is, emotional words that stab our hearts. We are suffering deep inside from these wounds, and that is what we want to get away from. That is what your spouse wants to get away from. The hurt, the blows. They're invisible, but they're bleeding deep inside. They're hurting deep inside. You are hurting. And that is what is driving the desire to get away from the source of the pain, which is you or him or her, so that you could you may not at least begin to heal. And so emotional safety, if you think about it carefully, if you become, if your spouse become a safe haven for you, if you feel comforted, if you feel satisfied, if you feel that you can be your own self, you can say, many couples say to me, you know, they can't, they're walking on eggshells. They don't know what to do, what to say. But let's get back to the video, because I really want to get down to the practical solutions.
Or how do you save a marriage that's on the brink of divorce? Try this. Try a 5-day experiment. Now we're going to call it an experiment because that's brain friendly. Meaning you're not going to resist it as much if it's just an experiment. Right?
Yeah, I like that. I like the concept that you're going to try an experiment, because usually we are so hurt, we are so vulnerable, we are at a point where we don't want to drag our integrity in the dust, and as a result we don't want to put ourselves out there. I'm supporting a couple right now, and the lady told me, you know, she doesn't want to be insulted again. She doesn't want to be rejected again. That is too hard. She doesn't want him to have a go at her again. She doesn't want to put herself out there, her integrity out there, and it be dragged in the dust. So he's giving you a very good framework, is to think about it as an experiment. So you put on your bulletproof vest, your emotional bulletproof vest to protect your heart and yourself. And you are going to, you know, just try some things and see. You're going to be observing, almost like a researcher. You do something, observe the action or the reaction, and then you adjust and readjust and respond accordingly. So let's take on that researcher's mindset, that experimental mindset, as we try to approach. The only thing here, he spoke about a 5-day experiment. The time, I think, is a little bit unrealistic. If you are at a stage where your marriage is blowing up, if you're at the tail end of your relationship, 5 days may not have an impact as such, and it may not be sufficient for you to see tangible results. It is almost like saying, okay, you're overweight over years and years and years. Now you want to shed the pounds in 5 days. It doesn't actually work that way. However, I don't think we should dismiss the idea totally, because sometimes a miracle may happen, but at the same time, I think we need to be a little bit more realistic, and we need maybe not just 5 days, we need a couple of weeks, maybe at least 2 weeks for us to see the needle move. However, we should give it at least a week or two for us to reassess the result of our experiment.
5-day experiment, you can do a little evaluation and see, well, is this working or not working? And you'll be able to tell the difference. So here's your 5-day experiment. The first task in your 5-day experiment is called 95-5. This is the hardest thing I'm going to ask you to do. It's a simple principle, but simple and easy aren't the same thing. We already talked about that. Here's what I mean. 95-5 is a ratio. Okay? A lot of people go into marriage thinking that it's a 50-50 kind of a proposition, right? You do your half, I'll do my half, everybody's happy, right? No, that never works. And think about it. You're already doing your half, aren't you? Yeah. So it's not about a 50-50. Here's what 95-5 is. I want you to assume 95% of the responsibility for this marriage, and you're going to expect about 5% from your spouse. All right? Now, anyone with a pulse can do 5%. What that means is your spouse is already doing enough. Now,
okay, this is a bit, let's get into this. 95-5. I think there is a step before this. I'm going to speak about the 95-5 because I actually like it and I subscribe to that concept. However, there is a step that I would like to share before we get fully into taking on responsibility. And here is the step. You need to assess the relationship and the marriage. What do I mean by that? you need to determine whether or not, A, is this marriage, is it even possible that the marriage can be? Because there are some marriages that cannot be restored. There are some marriages, because of the nature of things, that the marriage is impossible. It's impossible to restore them. For example, if there are mental health issues, if the person has Alzheimer's, if the person has gone off on maybe, some drugs, if the person is an addict, those situations, it's very difficult. Those situations have to be dealt with first before. If that person, for some reason or the other, and these crazy things happen, they went off and married someone else, that marriage is, if you're the second person involved in that marriage, your marriage, it's non-existent. It's annulled, and that cannot be restored until the things are sorted out elsewhere. So there are some marriages that cannot really be resolved. Secondly, there are some marriages that should not be saved. For example, if there has been chronic abuse, emotional, psychological, even physical abuse, and I say chronic. When I mean what I say, I'm not talking about reactional abuse or reactional situations where two people, they are saying things, things get wild, and after a while you get into a scurry. No, I'm talking about systematic, consistent attempts where one person abuses the other person, consistently trying to devalue them, to minimize them, to invalidate them, to insult them over and over and over again, chronic. That relationship should not be saved. So those are the two questions you need. Is it possible? Is it salvageable? Should it be? Now, if you think that yes, it is possible, yes, it could be and should be, then you come to this question, just what he's speaking about. Are you willing to put in the time, the energy, the effort, the resources that are necessary? Are you willing to invest, sacrifice, put yourself out there to do everything that you possibly can to save it? And if you're willing, then we get to our 95-5. This is where we get to the 95-5. If you're willing, and if you think, yes, it is worth it, because children are involved, there are lots of things are at stake, and because of these things, and because maybe you do have your love, and by the way, the love is still there, it's just buried under a lot of flack and mock and hurt and things that have been said. The love is buried under all of that emotional rubbish. It's just a way of clearing these out, bandaging the wounds, applying the necessary emotional medication so that there is healing and there is restoration, reconciliation, for you to start again. And all you need is the know-how. Yes, it can be reversed. Yes, you can get your love back. So if you are willing, then we get to the 95-5.
Things that your spouse could be doing better. And you're right, but that's not helpful. See, the temptation is to think, you know what? This thing would be so much better if my spouse would just shape up.
Yeah.
And you're right. I'm going to give that to you. This would be better if your spouse would shape up. But as soon as we identify what someone else can do, what does that look like, feel like, sound like to them? Criticism.
Yep.
Sound familiar from the Four Horsemen? Yeah, doesn't work. Okay, even if you're right, it can be right, but not useful. So we're going to go to 95-5. You assume 95% of the responsibility, and you expect about 5% from your spouse, so whatever you're already getting from them is enough. Now this switches the focus. Instead of what could my spouse be doing better, to, hey, you know what? What could I be doing better? And I guarantee in terms of what you personally could be working on, this is huge. And that's probably enough to save a marriage.
Okay, yeah. I think that he's going to go on to share some other practical and pragmatic things that you can do. However, I think that he could have actually mentioned maybe one or two that you can do here. And because he hasn't, I would like to go into some details. Now, before you go, let me just say the first thing that you should do is to call a ceasefire. By that I mean you and your partner or your spouse have been having a go at each other and you have been decimating each other. Sometimes some people use silence as a weapon. You know, they don't use words, but they go silent. That is what is called stonewalling. So what you need to do is to determine within yourself, you cannot actually, the 95% that you're going to take on the responsibility that you are not going to, in any way, shape, or form, continue to hurt your spouse. You're not going to do anything that is intended to get at them, is intended to teach them a lesson, is intended to make them feel how you feel. So you have to adjust your attitude right there. You don't have any control over what your spouse does, but you could say to him, now look, we've been hurting each other, we've been saying these nasty things, we've been getting at each other, we have been diminishing, downgrading, all of these things at each other, and I don't think it's right. I'm not going to do this, and I prefer if you don't. Maybe we could just simply not say things that are hurtful. If they do, you could simply say to them, that is not nice, and I don't like what you said, and what you've said have hurt me. But you take on the responsibility that you are not going to do it. You are not going to respond. You're not going to be tit for tat, butter for fat. You kill my dog, I kill your cat. The minute you do that, you change the dynamics immediately. Because when you don't respond, when you don't give as good as you get, when you don't try to get at them even in passive aggressive ways, they are going to recognize that the ball game has changed. And even when they say something to get at you, to get under your skin, to get some reaction, to trigger you, and they don't get the response that they used to get, they don't get that reaction that feeds the fight, then what are they going to do? They have to change. They will be shocked. And that alone is going to shift the dynamics of what is transpiring. And that will give you some chance to probably think and heal. So first of all, decide in your heart that you're not going to continue the war. Call a ceasefire. I call it a ceasefire. The second thing that I want to recommend that you do, this is very, well, I won't say that it's simple like he said, but not easy. Simple, but not easy. I know that you want your relationship back. I know that you're in a place where you're probably begging, you're pleading, you're crying, you're even promising that you would change, you're trying to negotiate. Stop all of that. Stop all of that, because those things will only prove that you haven't changed. Those things will only show your spouse that you're just trying to manipulate them. They would even show that you're needy, you're clingy, and nobody wants that. You need to stop that behavior. The last thing I want to say here, and there is a lot more I could say, is that you have to acknowledge that it is what it is. Acknowledge what your spouse, or the position that your spouse has. You may not agree with what he or she is saying or thinking or even telling other people, but acknowledge that from his perspective, from her perspective, well, you know what? You have a right to feel the way you feel based on your experiences and the perceptions. And you need to even allow the person go ahead and do what they are thinking of doing. In other words, you have to let go of the control that you want to have by stopping the person from doing what they want to do. You can even say something as simple as, look, I would actually prefer that we fight for our relationship and our marriage. I would like us to do what is necessary to restore the love that we once had. However, if that's your choice to move on, I would have to recognize and acknowledge and accept and honor your choice. So you put that out there. It is hurtful and it's very dangerous, what if the person continues along that? But yet you have to free the person to make their own choices and accept that those choices are his or hers to make, and you will honor them even when you don't agree and even when you prefer. So you let go, detach, and allow. If you want more help in how to do that, because this is not very easy to do, please let me know and I'll be happy to support you.
And see what happens. Okay, 2 more real quick. Now the second one is 25-5. This is why I wanted you to write it down, because each of these is a little different. 95-5 is about your focus. 25-5 is a gratitude exercise. I'm not going to give you all the rationale. I'm just going to give you the experiment. For 5 days, that's the 5 part of 25-5, you make a written list of 25 things for which you are sincerely grateful. Now, gratitude has been shown in the research and in our clinical experience to be a very powerful catalyst for all kinds of positive changes. So just trust me that there's a lot of rationale behind this. You're going to list 25 things for which you're grateful. Now, you don't get to repeat anything on tomorrow's list that was on today's list. Whole new list tomorrow. Now, here's where we're going to power it up. Okay? At least half of your list. That's 13 if you're doing the math. At least half of your list every day is about your spouse or your marriage the way it is right now without changing anything. So we're not talking about how it could be or how it might be or what we're going to create it to be. No, the way it is right now. What are you grateful for? Now, if you feel some resistance, that's good, because it just shows that you're used to thinking about this thing in a whole different way. We're flipping a switch in your brain and in your mind to ask it to find something that you're grateful for, and you'll find it if you'll look. Your brain has the power to find this for you.
Ooh, that is powerful. I like this. And I'm going to actually give you some rationale for this. Gratitude is one powerful thing. You may be in a situation, and most people are, where they have what is called the negative sentiment override. Because you've been hurt for so long, because your partner have been criticizing you, because your partner may have contempt for you, because your partner have been invalidating you, and having a go at you, because you're hurt, what happens by reflex? You begin to look for the negative things in the other person, and you want them to feel how you feel. So you have a go back at them. You have a quib at them. You try to show them up. Okay, well, look, you're saying that I'm this. What about you? You said that I did this. What about when you did that? And there is a kitchen sinking of negativity. And in fact, it gets to a point where you begin to see only the negatives of the person. I've had people sit with me for hours, and all they have to do is almost like a vitriol, is that they just splurt and regurgitate the negative, ugly things about their spouse. And they begin to see them, in fact, they see them as demons. They see them as these angels, these evil angels from hell that have been sent to just simply give them grief. And what that does is the more you look for the bad in someone, the more bad you see. There was a lady called something Newbold, and she gives a very interesting way of resurrecting love. And she simply says this: if you want to know if you are loved, look for love. Now that you can miss this. If you want to know that you're loved, look for love. And I like what Jenkins is saying here, that you have a gratitude list. And half of the 25, and by the way, his math is a little off, his 12.5, but I think he rounded it up to 13. Half of that 25 should be about your relationship and your spouse. So you begin to force yourself, because your mind is so locked onto the negative that it doesn't see the positive. It's almost as if I tell you, look around your room, tell me how many blue things that you see, and take a minute and do that if you can. And then when after you finish, come back to the video, and then I'll ask you, how many red things did you see? In other words, you wouldn't have noticed the red things because you only focus on seeing the blue things. Similarly, when you focus on the negative of your spouse, what happens? That's the only thing that you see. And when you see, the more evidence you look for, the more evidence of the ugliness that you find, until you begin to think of the person as being totally bad, as being totally evil, as being a character that you simply don't want to be with and be around. And similarly, they're looking at you that way. But when you begin to search for, when you begin to look for, when you begin to identify the good qualities, the good things, and I'll give you 3 particular areas to do this in. The first one is physical. So just look at the physical things that you like about your spouse. Maybe their eyes, their face, their hair, their shape, the way they walk. Just try to remind yourself of those things. Or qualities. What type of the characteristics of your spouse? What do you love about them? Do you love their laughter? Do you love their kindness? Do you love their wisdom, their humor, their wit? Just begin to look at those. Do you like the patience that they have? Well, right now they may not be very patient with you, but if you begin to look for these things, when you begin to identify, and then the third one, or the third category, is what they have done. You may think that they're not doing anything, but you need to think about it. Is the person still keeping the house clean? Are they still cooking? Are they still looking after the children? Are they still going out to work and paying the bills? What are they doing that are positive? What are they doing that are positive? So sit down and begin to muse. Begin to think about the positive things. And yes, you could do the 5-day plan that he spoke about. Every day, come up with 25 things that you are appreciative for, that you feel grateful for, the gratitude list. And I guarantee you, $1 against a dog biscuit, that you would see such a change in yourself. And guess what? When you begin to change in this positive way, you're going to begin to come alive again. You're going to begin to enjoy life again. You're going to begin to, that part of you that your spouse fell in love with will emerge again. And they would begin to probably second guess. They'll probably begin to second guess, this might not be the best idea. So let's continue with what he's saying.
That's 25.5. Now, the last suggestion that I'm going to give you for this 5-day experiment is a daily triple play where you get to give, send, and serve. Let's talk about all 3. Give. What you're going to give in each of these 5 days is a social gift to your spouse. There are 4 of them. I got these from Dr. Ann Demaray, who wrote a book called First Impressions. And these are brilliant. So here are the 4 social gifts. Appreciation. That's just gratitude. And you're already doing your gratitude list, so you can just pull something off of there and share.
This is good. So appreciation, when you appreciate people, I used to think that appreciation is for the other person. Actually, it does a lot for the other person, but it does a lot for you too. When you begin to appreciate, if you appreciate the sunset, you don't change the sunset, you begin to feel good about yourself. So yes, send a gift of appreciation. You could write a note, you could send a text, you could say that verbally to the person. Yes, just send the gift of appreciation. And even just feel that the feelings of appreciation for what that person is doing, kind of just the vibes that come out from you, that person, when they're in your presence, will be able to sense it, but you also need to action it.
As a social gift to your spouse. Connection, this is where you come together, things that you have in common, where you acknowledge and give a social gift of acknowledging the connection that you have with that person, something in common. The next,
that might be a little bit tricky, because what we find with love, when you're in love, there are certain ways that you connect. You connect through your eyes. You're constantly looking at the person, gazing into their souls. Just look at new lovers. They are constantly watching their face. So you connect with your eyes. You connect with your voice. You speak with each other. You connect with your presence. You're in the presence of each other. You can't wait to get together again, and you sit near each other. And then you connect through touch. Touching each other. Sometimes it's not necessarily affectionate touch that would lead to, sex or anything. It's just that light touch when you laugh and you banter together, you hit each other, you hold each other's hands, that kind of touch, and ultimately you will have the affection, and that goes along with that. So, this is a challenging space, especially when you're disconnected for so long. You're like ships passing in the night, that you don't look at each other. So to connect in such a situation, just find some time and space, however brief it may be, to speak to your spouse, to look at them, have a smile on your face. Not a scowl, not an expression, micro expression, because people can read you very easily, and you can read people. You could see those little micro expressions, and your tone, the tone of your voice. Drop your voice and let it be melodious, and no sharp sting in the voice. As you speak to the person, be calm, be loving, and make sure the tone, because that's another thing that our spouses and you are really hyper vigilant and sensitive to. Just the tone in the voice. It's not just what you say, it's the tone also. So see if you can connect in these ways.
And finally is elevation. Elevation is exactly what it sounds like. An elevator lifts people, right? So you're going to lift your spouse. You are going to elevate and enhance and edify your spouse.
Okay. Here's a simple way you can do that. Is whatever the person is currently doing, you appreciate them for that, and you tell them, look, we're not getting on at this point in time. However, I really appreciate that you take the children back and forth from school. It relieves me and helps me, and I feel really very good at that. Or last night you cooked a lovely dinner. I know we're not getting on, but I really enjoyed the dinner that you cooked. Or, whatever simple thing or way that person is doing, you give feedback, you give appreciation, and you elevate them. Or perhaps maybe they have gotten a raise, maybe they've done something in their job, and you just want to say, well, look, I'm really proud of you for that. And you've done well. Congratulations. Find ways, just simple, find ways, however simple, to elevate, that is, to make the person feel good about what they have done, what you appreciate about them, etc.
This can be done through a pleasant face, smile. Oh my gosh, that tends to lift people's mood, right? The appropriate use of humor is another way. Keeping things lighter, be less uptight about stuff.
Yeah, I like that.
All right, so you're going to give one of those 4 social gifts to your spouse on each of the next 5 days, starting today. That's part of the experience. I said give, send, and serve. So let's go to send next. What are you going to send? A message. What is the message? It is simply this, that you value this relationship and that you are willing to do what is required on your own part to make this work. Okay, you send that message. Find a way to send it 5 times every day, each of the next 5 days as part of the experiment. Send the message that you value this relationship. It might be a little note. It might be finding your spouse's favorite candy bar and leaving it on the pillow. Whatever it is, okay? A thoughtful text, a touch sometimes can convey this. So you find a way to send the message. Number 3 is...
Before we go on, I need you to recognize something, that even when you send these messages, be clear in your head. Don't have too much expectation. It's just an experiment. You are looking to see how your spouse is going to react to these. And in fact, because it's such a short time, your spouse might be very suspicious of you. Your spouse might be thinking, okay, right, I know what you're trying to do. You're trying to manipulate me. You're trying to get on my good side. So your spouse may even test you. So even though you're being nice, your spouse may even become even more rude. They may even become even more horrible. And in fact, most cases you need to expect this to happen, because they are going to consciously or subconsciously test to see whether or not you have actually changed, or you are employing some manipulative tactics. So be careful that you don't get discouraged when your spouse repulses the very good deeds that you're trying to do. They may not want it. They may not want to hear it. They may downplay it. They may ignore it. They may rubbish it. Just recognize that, yes, it gets darker before it gets light.
Is to serve. Serve your spouse. Find a way to step up and do something different from what you've been doing normally. I had a guy in my office, he said, well, I go to work and that's for her. Yes, I mean, keep going to work, but that's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about do something special. Do something that's out of your way to serve your spouse. Give a social gift, send the message that you value this relationship, and serve your spouse. That's the triple play, 5 days in your experiment. Hopefully you took notes on all of those, because this is going to be a lot of work, but I guarantee you, if you'll do these things, you can and probably will save this marriage.
Okay, there you have it. I would like to add that you probably need to understand that your emotions are going to go like a roller coaster. There are some days that you're going to be calm and cool, and if it works, it works. If not, there are other days when you are going to want some kind of reassurance and reaction that you're getting through. And there are other days still when you'll be tearing your hair out, if you don't have any like me, you'll be scratching your head, wanting your spouse to at least do something, say something nice to validate you. And you need to understand that that's going to happen. You're going to be going through a range, but you need to live above your emotions. You need to manage your emotions and recognize you're in it for the long haul. If you need some support with this, please feel free. I do have a guide, a cheat sheet of all of these things that we have spoken about, and stay hopeful. Stay hopeful. If you think your situation is hopeless, think again.